Alright guys, in this video we're going to talk about how to succeed on the MCAT kind of in an overall way, okay? So there's a couple of things we want to cover here. The first thing I want to talk about is confidence. Confidence is key to success on the MCAT. I have a lot of students who get into places where they're experiencing self-doubt, some anxiety, unsure about the MCAT overall. And if you have that viewpoint, if you have that perspective, it's going to increase your anxiety and your stress while studying, and even while taking the actual MCAT exam. One of the best ways to reduce your stress while studying for the MCAT and taking the actual exams and practice exams is to really just believe in yourself. Have faith in your abilities. Have faith in the work that you've put in. You will be spending hours studying for this exam, preparing, doing practice questions, doing practice exams, and the more you prepare, the more confident you'll feel in yourself and your ability to do really well on this exam. A lot of pre-medical students experience something called imposter syndrome, which is this irrational fear that you don't really deserve where you are, you don't deserve the next level, you don't deserve to be successful. And of course, that is wrong. You have put in so much work to get to this point, and you deserve every last bit of your success. So when you're studying, tell yourself you have mastery over this material. When you're taking the MCAT practice exams, tell yourself, I know this stuff. I've spent all this time studying it. And if you have that confidence, you'll be able to cruise through those practice exams and eventually the actual MCAT exam because you feel that confidence. Now, this kind of helps me transition to the next point that I wanted to make, which is about preparedness. The more prepared you are, the more confident you will feel. Okay, so if you feel a little less confident than usual, maybe increase your study hours, increase the amount of practice you do, the amount of practice exams that you take, and the more that you see these MCAT style questions returning to you, and you start to notice some of those patterns in the way that the MCAT likes to ask questions, and the pace and the stamina, the mental stamina that's required to take these exams, the more you do this repetition, the more confident you will feel in your ability to be successful on the exam. In many ways, the MCAT is kind of a brute force exam, and what I mean by that is you're just going to have to put the work in, okay? You're going to have to do a lot of repetition, almost like an anatomy class where you spend just a lot of time doing vocab and flashcards and things like that. You're gonna just have to do a lot of studying and a lot of practice and a lot of practice exams. That is a little bit discouraging for some people, but I see it as encouraging because it means that if I put the work in, I know I'll have a greater chance to succeed. Some exams aren't like that. I'm thinking OChem right now. It didn't matter how much time I put into studying for those exams, I still didn't feel very confident. But with the MCAT, if you do a lot of practice, you'll start to really build up that self-confidence, and I think that's a really good tool to have in your toolbox when you're taking the MCAT. Abraham Lincoln said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." I feel that way a little bit about the MCAT. You want to work smart and make sure that you're spending your time in the right way leading up to the MCAT. You want to make sure you're preparing day in and day out. And so by the time you get to the day of the MCAT, that axe is so sharp that you are ready to take it on with all that self-confidence that you've built up. Going along with this preparedness, you're going to need a plan, okay? And if you follow that plan, you'll feel a lot more prepared and henceforth a lot more confident. So we'll talk about this a lot more in depth later on in the course, creating your study plan. But you should, at this point, know that you should spend between 300 and 350 hours studying total for the MCAT. This should be over the course of about 3 to 4 months, and you should aim for no longer or no shorter, because if you do longer than 3 months, it'll be hard to kind of retain some of that material going into the MCAT. And if you do shorter, then it's going to be kind of cramming, okay? So I would say aim for 3 to 4 months total studying for the MCAT. Now, I know this is not always possible with non-traditional students or students who have jobs and are also studying for the MCAT. I understand that. It's difficult to create that study schedule for yourself. Do what works best for you and what works with your schedule personally. But I would say try to get it to that 3 to 4 month range as best as you can, and try to stick to that range. So 300 to 350 hours of studying over the course of 3 to 4 months is about 15 to 25 hours a week, or about 3 hours a day. If you're seeing this video now, you might be anywhere in the course of your studying, but if you are planning out the entire course of your MCAT studying, you should think to yourself, get that 3 hours a day accomplished. Now, that being said, what I did when I created my study plan is I made my study plan to get me to 500 hours of total studying, and that allowed me some wiggle room if I had to skip a study day or I had a particular exam coming up that I needed to kind of push the MCAT to the side a little bit. So I aimed really high and I fell short of that 500 hours, but because I aimed so high, the amount of hours I ended up studying in the end was closer to around 400 or 450 hours, and I felt extremely prepared and confident by the time I took the exam. Going along with this study plan, you also need a financial plan. So the next video, or in the next section, we're going to talk about the costs, the financial costs of taking the MCAT. So make sure you have that financial plan, you have that study plan, and then that will reduce your anxiety and stress a lot once you're going through that study schedule of the MCAT. So you don't have that financial stress weighing on you either. The last thing I wanted to mention in this approach to the MCAT is accountability. So I said you need to create a financial plan, you need to create a study plan. You also need to hold yourself accountable to those plans, okay? So we're going to put together a couple of tools to help you with that accountability. One is a study calendar, and one is a study hours spreadsheet, which we will talk about a little bit more in depth later on in the course. But that way you can mark off when you have successfully completed one of those study sessions, and you can make sure that you're staying on track to complete those study hour goals. You can also make sure that you have a budget, you have a full spreadsheet of all the costs associated with taking the MCAT, including your study materials, and that way you can have everything on one page, and again, this will reduce your total financial stress and overall anxiety about taking the MCAT. So overall, be confident, have a plan, believe in yourself, believe in your abilities. You deserve every last bit of success. Okay, there's no reason to believe you won't absolutely knock this MCAT out of the park. And I think every single one of you should be aiming for a 510, which is about the 80th percentile on the MCAT. If you aim for that and you get a 510, you should have a good shot to get into really fantastic medical schools. And I truly believe that anyone, if you put the work in and you're smart about your studying, you can achieve that 510. Alright guys, thanks for tuning in. Let's move on later to talk about the cost of taking the MCAT.